Ladies and gentlemen, I'm still on Cloud 9 down here in Houston. I'm still repping, obviously, the Astros, the World Series championship. I know it's annoying. Maybe this is going to be my last time to do it. Alan, I apologize. But hey, it's the least I can do.
I okay, I'm good with it. So I'm for me, I'm more happy for Mattress Mac than I am. You know that furniture salesman,
Yeah, the furniture salesman. The little known.
and the fact that we beat a team from Pennsylvania. I'm thinking of changing the name to Pencilneckia because bunch of pencil necks.
So we had, you remember we had the Joel Berry from the Babylon Bee on last season or 2 seasons ago, and Babylon Bee, when during the race between Fetterman and Oz, you know how they put up their stupid memes, and they're like, the race between Oz and Fetterman is neck and neck and neck.
Yeah, I saw that.
So good, man. So good. Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we've got if you look, even if you don't like comic books, which is like the world apparently is just drawn to comic books and comics in general because with Marvel and DC and everything, the Marvel verse and all that jazz. And what do you got? Yeah, The Walking Dead, right?
I got The Walking Dead right here. I have all 4 compendiums. And I have the first edition of The Walking Dead somewhere. I don't know where I put it. But yeah, I've got like all these compendiums. And yeah, it's the TV show was really good the first few seasons. I think maybe the first 5 or 6. And then it just kind of went downhill from there. If you look at, let's say, the first 3 seasons, you will see a huge difference between how those stories were portrayed versus the more recent ones, which I just stopped watching after season 10. I watched a few of season 11, which was their last season, but I just stopped.
I don't even know how that doesn't even make sense to me. I stopped in like season 3 or 4. How could you go and stop at season 10 when their last season is season 11? Why not just write it out, even if you don't like it anymore? You're so invested.
Part of it is that I cut cable TV, so I don't have AMC. And because I don't have AMC, I have to purchase AMC Plus in order to see, that's a big reason. And I did have AMC Plus for a little bit. Like I said, I watched the first 8 episodes, I think, and week. I just can't. So I haven't watched the rest. And I think their last episode is Sunday.
So The Walking Dead could have your time, just not your money. Like I get it. Like they can't have both, especially if it's a series that now sucks. I just lost interest, and it was one of the coolest shows I had ever seen.
Well, okay, Kathleen. I think her name is Kathleen Kennedy, who's one of the producers. She has driven the show into the ground, she's involved in the Star Wars movies. And, Star Wars and the Walking Dead have been 2 of my favorite franchises, and Kathleen Kennedy has single-handedly destroyed both of them, in my opinion. Let me take that back. Not maybe single-handedly, but she had a major effort.
She had a hand. She had a single hand in it.
Scott Gimple and some others, but yeah, they had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it is a shame how many of our institutions are, long time traditional, forms of entertainment have just been destroyed.
Yeah, if you look at if you go to YouTube and you watch where they critique and they talk about the wokeness of some of these movies and franchises, on the Star Wars one, if you saw the original Star Wars that came out in '77, and it was called Star Wars, it wasn't called New Hope. When they attacked the Death Star, and you looked at all the commanders, yeah, there was Princess Leia, but she was the only female there. Everybody else was, it was all men. But you got to remember, it's a military operation. Military operators are going to be men. Now, if you looked at was it the Star Wars Episode 8? There was a scene where they showed everyone in the operations room, and they were all women. That's not realistic. I'm sorry. I don't care how sexist that sounds. It's a military operation. So then I was watching The Walking Dead, and if I remember, this was season 11, where all these women went down into like an abandoned military base, and there was nothing but dead zombies. The whole area. They went in there to go get some food. Well, the problem is that the men stayed up in like the top, and they were helping the women get down. But the women were in danger. They're the ones who were endangering themselves. They were the ones that were in harm's way. In real life, I'm sorry, but a man's instinct is to protect the woman. Again, I know this sounds sexist, but that's realistic. Men are the ones that go into the dangerous, harmful areas to conduct operations. But they themselves stated that they did that because they wanted to show girl power. But it's not realistic. I'm sorry. Men are the protectors. They're not going to let women go into harm's way. They're the ones that are going to go in there to protect the men. Don't get me started. That's just
if only the feminist movement of today had taken place in the early 20th century, the whole survivor ratio would have been very different on the Titanic. Very different.
Yeah. Can you imagine if it was like, nope, we can't have.
Sorry.
Because they did women and children first. Okay. That's how it was. Although there was a funny meme where one guy goes, "But I'm trans." That guy was holding that girl. I forgot the bad guy, the one that was engaged to
Billy Zane.
Yeah, Billy Zane. He's holding the child, and he's like, "But I'm trans." And
come on. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching, do us a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you are just listening on the podcast, well, subscribe as well. It'd be a huge favor to us. And also, Apple, if you're listening on Apple, do us a favor. Leave us a rating and review. Tell your friends and family and say, hey, give Alan and Dustin an early Christmas present. And just go ahead and tap 5 stars and subscribe. You don't even have to listen. Just subscribe. You don't have to listen. Anyways, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on our website, thesonsofhistory.com. And you can check out some of our gear, which I'm actually going to be creating. I'm actually in the process of creating more t-shirts. The theme is politics is a joke. And I think you guys will. I think you'll like it. I think you'll like the t-shirts that are going to come out of it. Speaking,
how do you like my Second Amendment t-shirt? This is what I wore for Halloween. I told you I went as toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
I scared a lot of the leftists. I mean, they were like cowering in fear.
That's what you want for Halloween. You want to scare people. That's the whole idea. Well,
I had my cowboy hat, but I couldn't walk into the bar with my sidearms. So
yeah, that's a tough one. I know we had mentioned comic books. We had mentioned comics, and we talked about The Walking Dead and the demise thereof, just from it being a good show, one of the best shows on television. And now we see the demise of Marvel and DC as far as just like how good this stuff is. Like, it's just not. We've got a guy on the show who has created his own comic book. His name is Eric D. July. I've been a fan for quite some time. This is before he brought out the Rippaverse Comics. So he was always talking about comics and comic books and what was going on in Marvel and DC. His complaints, I mean, they just fit in line with my complaints and your complaints, Alan, I know. So we've got him on the show. He's going to be the guest on our show. But along with that, he's right up the road from us. We're in Houston. He's right up 45 in Dallas. Poor guy being in Dallas. It's unfortunate, but what can you do? It's bad enough that
I think they have a better football team than us. As much, I see people criticizing the Cowboys, but it's like They did win a few Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's hopefully nobody in Houston's criticizing the Cowboys because we are garbage town. Just terrible. But anyways, his YouTube channel is at Young Rippa 59. That's Young Rippa IPPA, RIPPA 59. Also, he's the lead vocalist for Backwordz. So it's Backwordz, but with a Z at the end. So it's a metal band, but with really smart, intelligent, libertarian-based lyrics. So if you don't like metal, like hardcore metal, you can just sit down and read the lyrics and become enlightened. It's really good stuff. And if you like metal, then you're going to love his band. He's the creator of, like I said, the Rippaverse Comics, and his very first comic has come out, Isom. And look, to rave reviews, and like he had a bar set, and for me it was pretty cool to watch him like present and say, look, this is where we are, we're about to release this, and then all of a sudden his expectations getting blown out the window. It's an incredible story. The comic book has taken off, and we're going to talk to him. Just really honored, and it's going to be a great conversation. So we've got Eric on the line. Eric, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother, and I appreciate you having me.
Hey, like I said, off the air, big fan. Been following you for probably a couple of years now, and I myself am really excited about what you're doing across the board. But we're going to be primarily be talking about your new product, your first edition comic book, Isom. Look, man, this thing has taken off extravagantly. And we were sort of talking about that. Like, you had a bar set that you wanted to hit, and it has exceeded that. I'll let you take it from there. Like, where was the bar set for you? And then what has the response been?
Yeah, so we initially, we set like an actual pre-order campaign goal of 100,000, though I had spent over double that to actually launch the project. So everything included from, the base stuff with my lawyers, dealing with them and getting the artwork done and printing and all of that. And I would have been perfectly fine with me making that 100,000. It's a new comic book company. We're kind of just launching, filling out the market, all of that. But yeah, we obliterated that within like the first half hour or so. And obviously within 30 hours, I believe, was the exact time we had hit 1 million. I thought about this many different ways, and even considering that this could have went perfect, absolutely perfectly, I never assumed that we will make 3.7 million. I'd never accounted for that. So that's where it ended up. But I didn't anticipate that. I'd be lying. I figured we'd be somewhat successful, but to do something like that to that degree was really unprecedented, certainly as an up and comer. And it really just goes to show how much of a demand it certainly was for the project.
So, as we all know, like success stories, like successes are not overnight. So you obviously have been a fan of comic books. Like most kids growing up, we loved either reading the comic books or watching cartoons about like either Marvel, DC guys. So where does all of this start from? Does it start as a kid and then you start just moving up and being interested in possibly creating? How did it start off?
Yeah, so I just happened to be a kid during the time when I would say comic book media was at its apex. And growing up in the 90s, where you had, of course, Batman, the animated series. I know Kevin Conroy, I believe, just passed away. So rest in peace to him. But, you had that. You had, what else? X-Men, the animated series. That all came out relatively when I was young and like watching Fox Kids and all of that. So we were really getting some good cartoons that were based on comic book media. But, my first like introduction to a physical comic was, of course, by my mother. And it was a Flash comic. And Wally was our Flash during that time. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world that there was this character whose power was to just run really fast. And I was a big time athlete as a youngster, and certainly, but I took that all the way up through the collegiate level and being a literal sprinter. And that was my kind of level of connection with that character. But of course, that introduced me to an entirely, different kind of world. And as I aged, you start to get the capital to be able to purchase this stuff, right? To go get comics whenever you want to, old and new. And I had aspirations to, of course, write, but considering the market, I didn't think this was something that I was going to be able to do at this young age, right? I thought there was something like maybe when I'm older, maybe in my 40s and all that, I'd be able to maybe do something. And of course, I think everybody had maybe a dream to write for Marvel or write for DC. That certainly is not on my list anymore. And I crossed that off the list. But just the demand was there. Everything was perfect. Everything was it was the perfect time to do it. And I said, why not? And of course, the audience responded in the way that they did. But certainly to answer that question, my mother introduced me to those books. But comic book media, animated American animated media was just really at its apex during that time, and I just happened to be a youngster consuming all of that.
Having seen the success of The Walking Dead, do you see possible TV show, anything like that?
Yeah, like that shows you that it's certainly possible to exist, like, and do something that's very successful and based on comic book media that's not attached to Marvel or DC. And you even see that with like the boys and stuff like that. There's a lot of that kind of going on these days. And yeah, it's a reality that I have to it's kind of weird to sit up here and think that type of way, definitely dealing with my team, and we're having these conversations about, how does this look on the next kind of year? What is our next year plan? Quarterly goals. And to even consider that, which is what we are, like live action and animated versions of our comic books, is quite something. And it's a great opportunity for me as well. And this is why it's so fulfilling. Definitely people that are very familiar with my content, how much, issues that I had with live action depictions of certain characters and all of that. And, this is kind of my opportunity to just simply not do what they did in terms of the mistakes that I felt they made, definitely with it being my own brand, like, really honoring source material and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it's, I'm willing to entertain anything that makes sense financially, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're making money, keeping operations afloat. I'll entertain anything if it certainly makes sense. But even to this day, I'm still kind of getting used to even thinking that large.
So you're a libertarian, so obviously you're pretty economically sound. So you had an expectation of maybe breaking even somewhere in there, and you go $3.5 million over your expectation. So obviously, when you make that much money, you have, okay, if I do this, I would like for my next step to possibly be this. But when that type of capital comes in, how do you keep from wanting to do too much too fast and then burn out your entire brand?
Yeah, you have to keep your expectations tame, and it's a quite the difficult thing to do. And this is something I've been very conscious of, and I think I've had a lot of help along the way, and just my experiences in business over the last decade, definitely with doing art, like with my band and all of that, and kind of being able to gauge and understand markets. I planned for even just keeping the lights on. We got a big new warehouse that we're going to be in, a headquarters that we're going to be moving into. But I put that money aside in an account and say I don't touch it. You know what I mean? Like that money just doesn't get touched. So I at least know, no matter what happens, we know that operations are going to be good for the next year. You know what I mean? And that's the type of attitude that you have to have. It's funny, we joke about this certainly on my channel all the time, about how, I'm not going around buying Lamborghinis or anything like that with this money. This is all money that has to get reinvested. And I'm very conscious and very aware that, if I want the money to go as far as I want it to go, then I have to be realistic with my expectations, and be very, very careful not to, to your point, overspend or bite off more than we can chew, and doing things of that nature. So, even like through this first campaign, I was there every day. I haven't been putting out content, but I was there at the warehouse myself, the actual owner of the company, alongside my employees, packing the hell out of the orders. And this is something that I of course want to do, but it's saving money and all that. It has to be sort of this expectation, because I've seen it all too much, all too often, certainly in the music industry, of people getting that initial big success, right? And then blowing the money on something nonsensical, or simply just having like just untamed expectations.
So, Dr. Thomas Sowell was an influence on your life, from my understanding. And funny, because I'm reading one of his books right now, and I really enjoy what he has to say, and he's a huge influence on me. So, what kind of influence do him and some others in how are they reflected in your comic book, or just in your, what kind of influence does it have on your work?
Well, I mean, definitely when you consider economics and what it is, the great, Mises talks about this being basically the study of human action, and looking at it like that. So you can make the argument that everything that I picked up from people that I've, certainly read and appreciated, I'm living it in some kind of way, directly and indirectly. But obviously, Thomas Sowell, to your point, is arguably my biggest influence. I would put two up there. Rest in peace, Dr. Walter E. Williams. As well. Both of those guys were huge influences, certainly on me, and getting out of sort of this mindset of economic leftism. You know what I mean? And reading books like Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, which is certainly a huge influence on me, and breaking economics down for the common person, certainly to understand, was absolutely massive. And we have little Easter eggs. Some people have picked up on it, even in Isom, with kind of my upbringing and my influence and all of that. But absolutely, like, there's no way something like that can't sort of show itself. But definitely, when you consider what economics actually is, it's really impossible, to not at least show in some way, shape, or form, and what it is that you're doing, what you've particularly learned. So those guys started me down that rabbit hole of, definitely starting with Sowell and learning about Chicago economics and Milton Friedman and all that. And then that led me to wanting to know more about other schools of thought. And of course, I went Austrian. I learned about more of the Austrian schools. So, going towards that and Mises, and then going full Rothbard, there was no turning around, certainly after that. But they sent me down that rabbit hole by simply making me think. So I owe a lot to those guys. And thankfully, I got to tell Walter E. Williams that myself before he had passed. And, I was in the Thomas Sowell documentary talking about what he had certainly meant to me. And that's really all I can dream of, to let those guys know certainly what they meant to me and how they impacted my life.
So you met those two gentlemen?
I haven't met Sowell, and I need to do that. I need to make sure that I do that. But I did get to meet Dr. Walter E. Williams. He was out here in Dallas at SMU one time speaking, and the SMU crew knew. And it's funny because I had no relationship with that school, whatever business school that was putting it on. And they reached out to me, knowing how much it meant, saying, "Hey, he's going to be here. You should come." And I did. And, surprisingly, he knew who I was. And I got to, again, just tell him, took a picture with him and all that, but just had a conversation with him to let him know certainly how much he meant was huge. Haven't got to meet Sowell yet, though.
Because I the first time I heard of Dr. Walter Williams, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and there he was, and he said some really ballsy things about, like, the relations between him and his wife, and I was like going, man, nobody talks like that anymore. And it was, and then I read up about him and his economic thinking, and I was quite impressed with him also. I've never read any of his works, but like I said, Dr. Thomas Sowell, I think I've stated that he and Dr. Jordan Peterson are the two most brilliant men in North America right now.
Oh man, you have to put a Sowell up there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And coming in at number 3, Eric D. July.
Giving me way too much credit there.
So all right, Isom, your first edition has come out, and in the opening pages, you write for all of the people who have watched their favorite franchises be hijacked. And man, have we seen that get done like constantly. One, I people are like, "Oh, are you going to go see the new Marvel movie or the new DC movie?" And I'm like, "Look, man, they've oversaturated the market for me. Like I can't do it. Like it's too many. Like I'll watch one every once in a while, but it's just they're inundating the market with it. And look, if the demand's there, okay, meet the demand. But you're correct. These franchises have been hijacked, and they've been hijacked by a leftist agenda, and it's very like they don't even hide it at all. And if they think that they're hiding it, they don't know what hiding means. But you brought up the music analogy or music in general, and you know, I have a cousin who had done very well musically, was going to sign with or had signed with Sony and Atlantic and everything, but they had come to sort of like a disagreement there. But he sort of had an inside viewpoint on the music industry, like the major music industry, and it was the lawyers, like the corporate takeover of music. And it's the lawyers and corporatists who are saying, this is the music that you're going to make. This is what people will want to hear, even whether it's true or not. And I think that that's why, in general, music sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad. Like, the music is bad. And people are like, do you listen to country? And I'm like, country from when? Like, what country music? Like, nothing of the past, like, number of decades. No. And so you have it to where corporatists have now taken the art out of the art. And comics is the same thing. How has this sort of degradation of art and comics and music and movies sort of opened up a door for you and other creatives to step in and fill that void?
I'm not oblivious at all to the fact that I owe a lot of my career in multiple avenues to the people that do stupid things upon which you're talking about, that has just turned off their customers, their listeners, the audience, the watchers, all of that. Because I did it with my band Backwordz. The same thing. It was like, hey, this metalcore is dominated by a bunch of leftists, right? How about I just make metal hardcore music that is that, you know, but I'm not a deranged leftist that despises his customer. And we saw a lot of success because we stuck out like a sore thumb because we were unapologetically who we are. Now with Isom, it was even simpler than that, because it was more like, to your point, you know, you watch these brands that have been just straight up hijacked by a bunch of people who cannot set aside their individual political beliefs. And that was the big difference, right? Stan Lee had talked about this and how, you know, you had these people that were certainly working for these companies that were of different ilks, right? Different backgrounds, religions, you know, and all that, and didn't really get in the way of what it is they're doing. Well, it's the complete opposite now, because now they feel like they have to beat their audience over the head, certainly with it, and basically actively leftists have the monopoly on that sort of material. So that's the only it's less, you know, we say keep politics out, more what it is. And I think people's frustration is, more accurately putting, is the lack of balance, right? So you'll see leftist political angles be presented as a positive light in this media. And of course, the people that are maybe to the contrary of that are always seen as the villains of the story. That's just how it is, right? So Trump comes along, he's MODOK, right? Literally, they made him MODOK, the actual villain in a Marvel comic book, which to me was insane that they actually even did that and went that route, but that's what it is. Barack Obama, he's on the cover of Amazing Spider-Man, right? Cheesing, smiling. Hey, it's a good time. We're going to present him in a good light. So the lack of balance is what really threw everything off. And all I simply said was, look, I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not going to be my audience over the head at that. I'm just going to make good material, work very hard, to present this in the best way that I possibly can. And really, that's all people want out of this medium. It had just gotten so bad with comic books, and I know it's happened in other mediums, but certainly with comic books, it had gotten so bad where people are just thirsty for something else. And they don't want to have to go to the latest movie or read the latest book, and they kind of holding their nose through it, knowing that it's kind of trash, but hey, it's this character you grew up on, or what have you. We're presenting something new, and it's familiar. I'm not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel here. It has that level of familiarity, but I'm simply not doing what the people that have hijacked these companies are.
So you've taken economics over politics, while big corporate comic book, Marvel, DC, and others have taken politics over economics. And we discussed like that sort of opens up a door for you because they are not creating for the customer. They are creating to influence the customer. And the customer doesn't want to be influenced. They just want something good. And from my perspective, it's sort of short-sighted economics to where you have, let's just say, a Superman, right? You have Superman, and we grew up with Superman. My parents grew up with Superman. If my grandparents were still alive, they probably had some experience with Superman. You take a name and then you present it and you throw it out there, you know that the return is going to be there. Mm-hmm. And I think over the past 5 to 10 years, it has gotten progressively worse, like so bad that now you're taking it to where, okay, you can present the name, but we don't want to watch it because we know that that's not a true rendition of what Superman is. So we're not going to view it. They've taken the rush of the immediate financial return, but now they have nothing. They've sort of destroyed the long-term projections, like the long-term economic return. So you have taken customers over your peers. Talk about how other professional comic book writers and creators have come after you, and you've made it known like you don't give a crap. Like you're doing it for one particular people, your customers, and that's why you're going to do well. Like explain like sort of the backlash and what you've had to deal with.
Yeah, we've obviously had people that are actual folks that are in the industry, be it in the comic book like access media guys, as well as actual artists and writers that have taken publicly issues with me. They don't even know what they're really mad at, but they're told, I guess, that I'm a bad person or something, and they go on and they knock it. But certainly, even with the approach of how we did it, right? You had so many folks that were telling me or had been telling me, you shouldn't have did it this way. You shouldn't have charged this amount of money. Do this and do that. And I've seen this idea with, I mean, this is the reality. I know this isn't necessarily controversial, but it's going to make a lot of folks mad, is that most artists are economically illiterate. Like, I'm just going to be completely honest with you. This is often why they jump into some of these just terrible contracts and deals, definitely in music and all that. But comics the same way. You have this whole stupid kind of starving artist kind of thing that they go through, where they insist you have to be broke. I reject that. That is completely nonsensical. But they're not actually sound, and they don't really understand the business side. That was the advantage that I had over a lot of these guys, that not only am I have the creative mind, I'm also sound in terms of the business approach. But they certainly didn't like the way that I was doing, even just the pricing and how we did things. And I've been giving advice certainly to other people who had aspirations to kind of do something similar, definitely being independent in this market. And I talk all the time about, look, if you are making material for your peers, you're probably making a mistake, because your peers are not your customers. Oftentimes, your peers see things through a lens that you can't even, or through a lens that is completely different from the customers. So I made it abundantly clear that I didn't care. So if even if they're going to critique my stuff, you have these tryhards that are going to critique things down to the panel, and that's fine. I'm not saying that all criticism is illegitimate. What I am saying is that often what that person who is my peer per se cares about, the regular customer does not. So a lot of folks have unfortunately fell victim. You see this with a lot of mainstream guys, but even guys that are more the underground, where they're making the mistakes of trying to impress or write for to impress their peers, to get admiration, to get pats on the backs by their peers, and they often end up broke because of it, because the customers don't care about what your peers care about. It is a talent in itself to be able to separate the two. And so many artists in many different genres have made this mistake of trying to do things to impress whether it be ideologically, whether it be even from the actual art itself, to impress their peers. And that's not oftentimes I'd say it's not what the customers care about. So definitely, if you want to do this and you want to make a living off of it, yeah, I'm gonna take my customers over my peers 9 times out of 9.
I was watching some documentary about some of the movies that have been coming out. Well, first of all, Top Gun, the latest Top Gun, was not a woke movie, and it just shattered box office records. And then you had some Chris Pratt movies like The Terminal List and The Tomorrow Wars that surely did not look PC to me in any way. And then 2 franchises that I really loved at the beginning, Star Wars and The Walking Dead, started off strong, but the latest Star Wars movies sucked, and the last couple of seasons of The Walking Dead has sucked. So I don't understand why these executives are still trying to push this leftist agenda when the people are absolutely starving for something that's more realistic, that's not PC. I mean, what do they say anything? These people who complain to you, how can they defend what they're espousing?
Well, I think this is where I think so many people within these definitely leftists in general, they've long infiltrated the arts. But what happened is, and I think definitely in the, when you look at the mid 2010s up to now, is that a lot of people in powerful positions with control of these entertainment entities or whatever had been convinced by people that probably had no business in their positions that this was the market, right? This was the way of the future, and you got to get in now. So you saw that drastic shift then where, basically actors and actresses, the mystique of Hollywood is completely gone. They have no problem telling you how much they don't like you. Definitely if you have voting habits, that's different from them. Executives have gone, we've seen what Disney's done, as well as other companies have gone, basically aligned themselves with people that are just outright leftists. And I think they were just simply convinced that this was the way. And to be fair, short term, that worked, right? Because they had control of franchises that people knew and loved. So you can put out a dud of Star Wars, but it's Star Wars, one of the biggest franchises to ever exist. So people are always going to give it the benefit of the doubt, or so they thought, will give it like at least some sort of level of interest to go reach into their pockets and pay for it. And now you've seen definitely in the last, I would say certainly a couple of years, but certainly over this last year, where a lot of those franchises, which they just couldn't miss, even if it was a bad movie, they were going to make the top dollar and have some level of interest. That's not the case for a lot of these things. When you look at even like their previous story, movies that are barely making money, they may make their budget as far as what they spend on the movie and marketing, but it's like barely breaking even. And some have even lost money. We've seen Marvel films that are like Eternals, like there's films that have actually lost money, which should never happen under a Marvel property. Solo, I believe, same thing. It's lost money. Like this Star Wars. That should never happen, but it's happened because people have said, look, I love what you have, but it's not because of you. And if you are going to spit in my face as a customer, I will simply not spend money on that project. Now, my opinion is that this hasn't happened fast enough. I think a lot of people need to detach themselves from this. But, you're seeing that they're really starting to feel those economic consequences of really catering to a demographic that simply wasn't there. Or rather, they overstated it. Maybe they got confused by certain elements of social media, that this was what people want to hear. This is who or what people want to see, and then you find out, well, that demographic you're catering to is either broke or it doesn't exist, and they're not really spending money certainly on your product. So I think they just got a lot of bad information, and it's going to be interesting to see if they keep committing to this or if they pivot. Definitely, as a lot of folks like myself have taken upon themselves to be the alternative and have saw some economic success because of it. It's going to be interesting to see where these companies go.
So, speaking of wondering where the companies go and the whole kowtowing, and like eventually people have got to sort of just get annoyed enough to like, look, enough with calling me names. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm a sexist, racist, bigot, homophobe, Islamophobe, xenophobe. Like, enough. Like, those are no longer, those don't mean anything anymore because you've taken the definition of those words and now they don't mean what they used to mean. And you still have major corporations that kowtow. Who knows if they are going to eventually just say, okay, enough with that. We made a mistake over the past few years and now, or maybe they're too entrenched, like the people that are on the left are now entrenched in the power positions to where, no, we're going to be riding this boat until it sinks to the bottom of the ocean. One of those corporations affected you personally, which would be PayPal. Tell us about that whole fiasco.
Oh man. So obviously with the Rippaverse, seeing the success that it had, we had a meteoric kind of rise, right? Large influx of money. And one of our processors, which the only reason I was using PayPal, a lot of international customers recommended it. That's what they wanted to use. I wanted to accommodate them. And so, we hit the million or so mark, and getting close to that mark. And PayPal decided to put a hold on the money. So meaning that they were going to still be a processor, but they weren't going to give me access to the funds. So initially, because of the influx, though this wasn't like July Ripper LLC didn't start in July. Like we'd been operating as a business before. But even if I accepted it, that, okay, look, you saw a large influx of money, you want to verify that it's legitimate and there's no fraud or scamming going on. Okay, fine, whatever. They got everything that they needed from us. It had nothing to do with like a pre-order policy, which I know a lot of my detractors has wrongfully assumed that had something to do. It had nothing to do with anything. They simply were holding the money because of the influx of money that came in. And despite me giving them the information that they needed to, on down to warehouse location and proof of product, they still were holding the funds. So it moved from a hold to a reserve. And what that meant was that, well, this phantom sort of 60-day process, right, I believe was the exact amount, where they were going to hold the money, like it's in their policy that sometimes they do this, where they were going to put it in a reserve, meaning that they were going to hold it because of chargebacks, yada, yada, potential stuff, all that. So I had obviously, me and my lawyers had already talked about this, and we were like, okay, considering how expensive this could be, I guess we wait this out, we see what they do. And they said on the 61st day, according to them in my message center, they said that they were going to give us access to the money. 100% of it, not half of it, 100%. Now, this number had hit a $1.3 million. Now, obviously, at some point, I cut off PayPal altogether, knowing that we weren't going to be using it, so I had cut it off. So they had to use our processor on our website. Nonetheless, almost $1.3 million that I had no access to for months. Even despite me sending product out, still never got access to it after the 60 days had passed. They tried to end up putting it on another additional reserve of 90 days. So again, just to go through this, 60 days, and that wasn't 60 days from the time we started the campaign. That was 60 days like in late July, like right, that they did their little internal review and decided they were going to do a reserve. So then they came up with some phantom 90 days out of nowhere. And I was like, all right, well, I guess this is where we're at. Had my lawyers, we're sending letters, got to get sent, all of that sort of stuff. They stealth edited and gave us like half the money. As soon as I saw that, it wasn't a stealth edit. It was more of, they said that they re-sent me basically that message that I had in the message center, but the amount was taken off, essentially giving me 50% of it, roughly. It was like 500,000 something. And so I took it out, obviously, immediately. But obviously, that's not sufficient. I didn't ask for half of it. I asked for the whole thing. And they, after, again, we're getting in the trenches now. They stealth edited. There was never any update. There was no admission of wrongful doing or anything. They just up and released the money. They never said why or anything. They just up and said, okay, we actually know it was okay. They know this was about to get real. They said, let's just get this guy to shut up and give him his money. But my problem, and we're still, my lawyers are still talking about, dealing, discussing what the next move is with them, because they're collecting interest on all that money. Money's old at the end of the day. But could you imagine if, like some small businesses do, imagine if I used PayPal as my only processor? That would have derailed my business. And for those that maybe do that, I can see how definitely small business owners, that something like that could happen, and maybe they don't like you. Maybe there's some idiot that's in the office that doesn't, maybe thinks differently from you or whatever, for whatever reason, through some phantom policy, they just pull a trigger and you don't have access to your money. If you got to purchase product, if you got to purchase supplies to get to your audience, even though they have voluntarily paid for it, that could derail an entire business. And this is why, I'm never using PayPal. Rippaverse will never be using PayPal, certainly ever again. And I would advise against those that definitely could see an influx of money or business, not to use that company. But it goes to show that these companies ain't playing around, and it doesn't have to be for a good reason. And definitely, if you don't have the money that I had to have the lawyers that I had, they would yank your chain for as long as they are allowed to do so.
Did they do this for political reasons? Because I've been hearing things that PayPal is doing, and I cut them off, because many of my bills, like if I went through Amazon or eBay or even Google, PayPal was the method for me to make my payment. But when I heard what was going on with them, I immediately deleted every single account I had that used PayPal, and then I wrote them and told them my reasons for cutting them out. I wanted to close my account, and the agent that was contacting me was pretty obtuse about, or at least pretending to be obtuse about, well, why are you so upset? I don't understand. And I said, you know what I'm talking about, y'all's practices. And guy was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And, and they're like, keep talking to me so that we can have some kind of an understanding. But I just stopped replying to them at that point. But was it because of political reasons, or was there something else involved for them delaying your payment?
With companies like this, they'll never flat out admit it if it is. So it's very hard to nail that down. It just seems to always happen to people that aren't deranged leftists. A lot of this funky business. But what a lot of these companies do, and companies like PayPal, is that they write like kind of these loose, kind of very vague terms that will allow them to do stuff like this. And so if they find you in error, even if you're not, let's just say, again, phantom rule, they just made it up, pulled it kind of out of their behind, they'll fall back on that as their reasoning for doing it. But I think we've seen, definitely with these tech companies, far too many like examples of let's say some slang. I'm not going to sit up here and say that there aren't any people that are leaning on any end that hasn't been wronged by a company like PayPal. But we've certainly seen among a lot of these tech companies that there has been a clear and obvious slant. And I'm not going to just say that, well, that's why they did it. But if I'm not going to certainly, if you believe that was why they did it, I have no desire to convince you otherwise, because that very well could be the case. And we've seen examples of companies like PayPal certainly doing exactly that. So this is why you always got to have backup plans for the backup plans.
So you recently said that you think a creative renaissance is going to be taking place. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that because of the power of just the internet in itself and the opportunity that so many of the kind of establishment entertainment has left for us, I believe that because the means are now certainly affordable for a lot of people to do things that we otherwise could not do, from video, from print, from everything. There's just so much opportunity out there. And it's far more affordable than what it was maybe before. But a lot of these were more rich folk hobbies, and now you're seeing people able to come up with short films, for example, that are able to rival big studios. And because people have that power now kind of in their hands, and again, it's like you had this was, let's say, this was establishment entertainment's, this was their screw up, and it was for them to screw up, and that they had the product, they had access, even if the creators are long dead, doesn't change anything, that they had rights to a lot of these products that so many people are certainly familiar with. But when you're, as the technology is growing in the way that it has, and you're simultaneously telling large swaths of your customer base that you don't like them, you're creating this opportunity that maybe wasn't there before, but it certainly is, where it's two things. Creators are more incentivized to do it, to go create, and customers are more incentivized to go find something that's not, yours, not attached to you. And by you, I'm meaning these certainly like entertainment establishment. And I believe, and it's not just a hope, I'm seeing this with other fellow creatives, and I'm a living example of this, that there will be a creative renaissance, and that's gonna look a lot different. You know what I mean? I believe that if we, let's say, move into this age of a more decentralized entertainment, you're going to have more smaller companies doing material. They're going to be owned by those guys. And instead of having one mega corporation that owns all of these different properties, you'll probably have hundreds of them that own their property that may be seeing some level of success. I certainly welcome that. It gives people more options. It's more beneficial, certainly, to those individuals that maybe are more incentivized to like own their own material and all of that. And I certainly welcome it. It's just an opportunity of a lifetime where, again, the technology is certainly in our hands to make things happen. I can connect. I have a direct line of sight with my audience, people that insisted that I went through somebody else to publish and do all these other things. I said, why? When I see my audience like they're in my chat, like I can connect with them. I don't need any of those services that they certainly provide for me. So I did it, and it worked out. But I'm not the only one. I'm not even the first. So there will be others. And I used to be one of those guys, like with a Marvel or DC, all sour, and a lot of my come up was doing exactly that, doing reviews and all that. And now I'm like, you know what? I hope that you keep screwing up, because with each individual movie, goofy thing that you do in a comic, you are sending customers my way. And so it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, we can see that with a lot of movies that have been coming out where, they're pushing some kind of agendas, and they are bombing. They're bombing in the movie theaters. So yeah, I mean, that is going to push people to movies, books, comic books that don't cater to that type of ideology.
100%. And like I said, it's like with movies, Marvel couldn't miss. There was a time that they could not miss. You know what I mean? And now you've seen them actually drop movies that lost money.
Yeah, was it She-Hulk? I think I heard
it was terrible. Certainly, it was not well received. Andor right now with Star Wars, I don't know anybody that's even talking about that, which is crazy for me to even believe that there's an active Star Wars show that nobody's freaking talking about. So it goes to show that just people are kind of becoming more and more disinterested, and the people that fake like this stuff out of spite. And this is what I think a lot of these mega corporations were banking on. Those Twitter weirdos who sit there and make stan accounts and pretend to like this stuff because their political views are being highlighted or emphasized, and they love that. Or More so, it's being done out of spite to their ideological enemies. They love that type of stuff, but they're not reaching in their pockets to go buy this material, or it's simply not enough of them to actually, let's say, carry a film. They actually need, and this is when Hollywood doesn't seem to understand this, and okay, cool, let them continue to not understand this, that all of those, every after the election cycle, they tell so many people how much they despise them. They don't seem to understand if they're going to maintain the status quo that they have, definitely economically, they need the money from the people that they despise, period. So they do themselves in, and they have done themselves in. And unfortunately, a lot of these studios and people that back these guys are all in on it as well. So they have no issues telling you how much they suck, or how much their enemies, they don't like their enemies, and they'll tell you how much you suck. But if that's what they're going to do, they're creating an opportunity, and they're going to continue to lose money. So companies that we saw for years just couldn't miss are missing right now. And I think this trend is just going to continue if they continue doing what it is that they're doing. And that's putting out material that nobody's actually interested in.
Well, I know that they're attacking the audiences now if they are saying that a character was no good, or maybe a movie was no good. There was some director, and I think it was called Bros or something like that Dustin mentioned one time, that he was pissed.
Hey, man.
Hey,
Don't
you're the one who brought it up,
like,
not me. So
don't act like you didn't go see that movie too.
Hey, not that there's anything wrong with that, but no, I mean, but the director or producer attacked the audiences, saying, "Oh, you didn't like the movie because those people were gay," or the latest ones of Star Wars. And I don't have HBO or Netflix or anything, so I haven't seen any of the recent ones. But there was there was criticism of an actor who was black, and the creators were like, "Oh, you don't like them because you don't want any black characters on Star Wars." And I'm like going, okay, did people forget Billy D. Williams? He played Lando Calrissian, and I loved the guy. I thought he was perfect for the part, and I don't recall ever hearing any criticism of him. So now I'm seeing where they are attacking the audiences. If you don't like somebody for any reason, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, and that's the tactic that they have adopted. Certainly those guys in the Star Wars film fit like kind of area, like arena. Like you had people that were critical of this recent Reva character that was in one of their recent shows, and criticism of anybody that's black means you're criticizing them because they're black, right? That they can't, they always conflate the two. It can't just be, well, maybe that character's just trash and they suck. So then they'll come out and gaslight the entire audience that has a problem, or you don't like this because you don't like black women and all this other nonsense. And people are just tired of that, like actually bored of that. And even despite them losing on so many efforts, they continue to deploy that as a tactic where they'll say, okay, you didn't support this garbage that we threw at you, and therefore you're homophobic, you're sexist, you're racist, you're all the other isms and phobias and all that stuff. And people have just grown tired of it. It's just not a working sort of method at all. And if you're going to bank on that audience actually that would support that crap, supporting your work, man, I just don't see how you're going to remain afloat in the upcoming years, because you're seeing that this attitude towards your audience isn't sustainable. I mean, we hear about these big mega corporations who adopted these sort of tactics, are laying people off by the thousands. And of course, it's those diversity hires and weirdos who were in jobs and positions that they had no business being in, that they were bragging about all of this other nonsense, who are going to be the first to go. I mean, you had the whole situation with Warner as well, you know what I mean, where they came in and asked, you had to transfer kind of a power with AT&T selling off all of those properties, and now you got the Warner Discovery, and Zaslav, I believe is the name of the CEO, comes in, and they're cutting stuff left to right because you see companies just not making money. The program was literally operating at a loss, like for X amount of time. So this is not a sustainable practice, and it'll be far too late, at least I hope, before they ever get it. And again, like I said before, continue to do it because you're sending people actively towards your competitors.
I see it as sort of like it's like the number one cause of divorce. It's like ladies, you gotta come up with new arguments. You gotta come up with new complaints about your man. If it's the same thing, he's never coming back. He's gonna come back once you're asleep. Now, to Alan's point about his favorite movie, Bros. It's funny. It's like when that movie was coming out. No pun intended. That really just took place. They were saying, if you're straight, this movie is not for you. And when like all the straight people didn't go see it, and you have an audience that is not that large going to see it, and you bomb at the box office, all of a sudden they're going to say, well, you didn't go because you're homophobic. And what's funny is I think it was a Hollywood Reporter or someone else was like saying once that movie bombed, it was like, this is a sign. This is just a sign that rom-com is dead. And then the new movie with Julia Roberts and George Clooney, that rom-com comes out and does very well at the box office. And somebody reports rom-com is very much alive. I'm like, no, it's the audience. Like just understand the audience and understand economics. And I think that is the primary point, is if you do not understand economics, you will be a starving artist. You will destroy a company that either you've inherited, and typically, like a lot of times, that's the case.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yep.
These people come in.
It's going to be, if the story sucks, it's going to bomb. There was a movie in the, I grew up in the 70s, and John Travolta was really big. He did Grease, he did Saturday Night Fever, and then he did this movie called Moment by Moment with Lily Tomlin, which, it sucked. I mean, it sucked. It took Urban Cowboy to temporarily revive his career again, and then it just kind of went down until Pulp Fiction. So, yeah, I mean, it has to do, if the movie sucks, people are not going to go watch it. It has nothing to do with, whether it's gay or whatever, because I don't care. I mean, I'm sure I've seen a gay movie, but I can't think of one right now, unless, Dustin, you know them real well, if you can think of one.
Yeah, I mean, let me look at my DVD collection. I got them sectioned off, and
oh, wait, what was it? Basic Instinct that had some lesbian action in that one.
See, but that's a big difference. All right, we're getting off track. I got more or less one more question for you, Eric. Alan, do you have anything else before I jump to mine?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that poster behind you. Now, I know it's I don't know if it's pronounced Mises or Mises. I think that's a guy from the Austrian school, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It says, is it Mises? Mises. Okay, it says Mises, but what I'm seeing is John Fetterman. That looks like John Fetterman.
He's not, and I know damn well he certainly is not, if he even knows where he's at. He's not privy to the Austrian School of Economics, that's for sure. Good luck asking him what the hell that is.
I think he'll probably talk about kangaroos or
yeah, he'll go on that'll be the direction that he goes in for sure.
Oh man, yeah, I'm sure you guys have seen the memes. Biden Fetterman 2024, it's a no-brainer.
Oh, that's so good.
That's beautiful. All right, man. So my last question, I just want your thoughts on two things. We talked about music. Obviously, you do metal with libertarian lyrics. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like metal, listen to his band. If you don't like metal, read his lyrics, and you'll learn a lot. So I want to go music first. Your thoughts on. Here's my thought first, and I'm going to Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine is against the machine, and yet they're very much part of the machine because they're communist, right? And so they're for centralized government and overbearing government demand, like controlling your lives. I like, do you see the hypocrisy there? And what are your thoughts on?
Oh, that's very prominent. Again, that's why we stuck out like a sore thumb. All of these, for lack of better terms, the vast majority, I'd argue 99% of these sort of anti-authoritarian, fist up in the air, punk rock, metal bands are chicken crap at the end of the day. A lot of them are more, they're just state socialists at the end of the day. And it's like more of like kind of edgy teenager kind of I'm against this thing, but you saw certainly in 2016 where they all went the same exact way. And then in 2020, the same thing happened again, where they sway, they go wherever the left kind of goes. Certainly the state leftists go, and that's just what it is. And, these people, and it really stems from the fact that they don't actually believe in anything it is that they say, right? It's a very easy thing to get up there and say, well, government bad, fight the power and all that. But, in order for that to be something that you actually, genuinely understand and for people to see that, you have to kind of live that. And often you see these guys go support, like I saw the entire metalcore industry, especially in 2016, go out there and support Bernie Sanders, who couldn't be, the staunchest of the statists in the run, but they went and supported him. You cannot be pro Bernie Sanders and anti-authoritarian. Those are diametrically opposed. So absolutely, we see the hypocrisy, and this is why a lot of these guys don't believe in any of the crap it is that they say. I mean, you tell them that they like to believe that, but really they're only against authoritarianism if they can tie it to someone that has an R next to their name. In the event that it comes from definitely Democrats and all that you'll see them kind of take shots from afar, certainly not to the same degree of what they would with the Republicans.
Yeah, that's what I was saying actually last episode, was that these people who get on, they do not believe anything that they say, which is why they change so rapidly. Last one, it came out, I think this year or end of last year. Your thoughts on the Batman, the new one?
I hadn't seen it, which is, believe it or not, that goes to show how crazy things have gotten for me.
Yeah.
Batman, for those of you that don't know, is my favorite comic book character, right? As an adult, my favorite comic book character. And for me to see a Batman film come out and me to be like, nah, I'm not interested. I'm done with DC. And yeah, a lot of it had to do with like Rippaverse stuff that I was working on and all that. But even with a lot of the new like bat related stuff that has come out, I'm just not, had this Gotham Knights game that came out. I'm an avid gamer, people know that. Have not played that game, and I'm just not interested. And a lot of it, yeah, it's two things at work. I have a lot of work that I'm doing, and now I have to think of myself as their competitors. But also in the same respect, it's just now, especially knowing where DC is and the direction it is they're going, I'm like, dude, I don't want anything to do with anything they doing right now. So I'm just checked out, and it's been easy. I would have never thought that I was a comic book shop every Wednesday guy, getting hundreds of dollars worth of Marvel and DC books, and I don't have a pull list at all. I'm not going to the comic book shop every Wednesday. I'm just doing my own thing. And you'd asked me that a few years back that was ever going to be the case, I'd have told you were crazy. But yet here we are.
Yeah, I grew up big Batman fan. The animated series was like, I was like religiously that, and
That's
Gargoyles.
the definitive Batman. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I used to read Richie Rich and
okay, kill him.
Heathcliff, Charlie Brown, Peanuts. So yeah, those were my comic books.
You couldn't bring up Calvin and Hobbes. At least that's respectable, man.
Calvin? No, I didn't. I liked Heathcliff. I thought Heathcliff was cool.
He was a cat.
I did like BC. I think they now call it BCE. I don't know, but yeah.
BC was good. All right, Eric, where can people purchase your comic book, Isom?
You can, of course, still get it. Cover C, Rippaverse. Rippaverse is RIPPAVERSE.com. You can, we're our own distributor, so you purchase it, you'll get it from us. And of course, ericdjuly.com if you want to get any of my stuff. And then go buy any of that material. Of course, right now, because the campaign's finished for Isom 1, you can only get cover C, cover A, and B. You may can get it in some select comic book shops, but good luck. Those things have been going for hundreds of dollars on eBay. The one that you have right there, certainly on your desk, that is a one that's the cover A, and that's very difficult to find, certainly right now. But there will be other opportunities as well. So just stay locked in on Rippaverse.com, and we'll have some more books coming to you.
Now, when you get enough of them, are you going to do like The Walking Dead, where you have like all these compendiums?
I would love to do that. So Isom 1 was the first part of the arc. It's probably gonna be a 3-part arc. So I would love to, once the arc concludes, have one of those big kind of omnibuses or whatever of a collection, a trade rather, of the book. I think that'd be glorious, and that'd be our opportunity to do like a hardcover or something like that if we wanted to.
It's good stuff, man. It's Isom. This is the first edition. Ladies and gentlemen, go get it. Not only will you be doing Eric a favor and the comic book industry a favor, but you'll be doing America a favor, a huge favor. Hey, man, this was so great getting to talk to you. And I hope we get to talk again. But thanks again for being on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
Oh, of course, anytime, brother. We'll do it again.
All right, Dustin, that was a fun conversation.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I didn't know much about his comic. I had watched many of his YouTube videos, and I like what he had to say, and I read his history. And it's funny because I grew up, when I was a kid, I grew up in a couple places in Dallas, Oak Cliff and Farmers Branch. And he lives, or I guess he grew up in Oak Cliff. And then I found out that he went to A&M also, a different campus. I went to the main one, but really, really fascinating stories. So I'm really glad that we have people like him who hasn't been influenced by the way entertainment is going. I'm so sick of woke. I'm sick of woke. I think a lot of people are sick of woke. And as I mentioned during the interview, if you look at Top Gun, you look at, was it The Terminal List, some of the Chris Pratt movies, The Terminal List, The Tomorrow Wars, people are starving for non-woke entertainment. And he flat out said that, because of the way the executives are pushing wokeness, that they're gonna push the audience towards non-woke entertainment like his comics.
Yeah, I mean, and as long as we have the freedom to create the free market enterprise, and just you will have the destruction of businesses and companies as big as these multi-billion dollar companies like Walt Disney or Marvel or DC. And I know Marvel is owned by Disney, but they will.
Marvel is owned by Disney?
Yeah. Yeah, they bought them out.
God, no wonder.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right?
Disney seems to be doing everything they can. If Walt Disney was around right now.
Like ESPN. ESPN is owned by Disney, and it makes complete sense. Why, how all of them have gone far left.
It's funny. I mentioned a movie. It was one of our book and movie recommendations. It was a Disney movie that showed communism in a very bad light. I think it was called The Night Crossing, and it was about two families that fled communist East Germany by balloon. They rode in a hot air balloon, and they crossed over the Iron Curtain and landed in West Germany, which was a free country at the time. And I don't think Disney would make movies like that anymore.
No.
And the movie was made before Michael Eisner took over and started veering the company to the left.
Yeah. And well, here's the thing. As long as we have the ability to, have the free market of ideas or whatever, the marketplace of ideas, and we're able to freely do that, you're going to have creators with like Eric, with massive talent, who are going to see an opening that's just what happens. Like, you see an opening and like, look, I see an opening, I see the demand, and I see the lack of supply. And that's the thing, is like, Eric is already creative, but now he's able to take not just his creativity, but his knowledge on economics and how to actually treat money correctly and investment correctly. And so, sky's the limit for someone like him, and sky's the limit for somebody, whoever's watching, who may have an idea. Study the market. Like, is there a market? And, if there's a market out there and somebody's not supplying it, get out there and do it. And that's the beauty of living in this country, at least right now. Hopefully things don't change. Things are changing for the worst, but we still have the ability and the freedom to create whatever, more or less, whatever we want. So just kudos to Eric for doing what he's doing. It's great stuff. So I guess we've pussyfooted around long enough. You want to jump into This Week in History?
Yeah, because looking at what yours is, I want to hear what you have to say about this.
All right, look, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. Like, I had started from the beginning of this season lining out my This Week in History, right? I got on, so we're doing this episode. We typically do it on Saturday. I'm just making an excuse. Do it on Saturday, but tonight, we did it on a Tuesday night. And I noticed that I didn't have a This Week in History. So I was scrambling for something that would tie in comic book related. That would also be This Week in History. As good as I could get is this month in history. So on November 12th, 2018, Stan Lee, the creator, the comic book legend, the guy who started Marvel, died. It was the end of an era. To an extent, the era more or less ended in 2009 when Walt Disney purchased Marvel. That's when it all started to come down. But they sold it for $4 billion. That's a chunk of change. But going back, I think it was, I want to say 82 years ago, like through his work and collaborations with frequent artist writers like Jack Kirby and Steven Ditko, he took Marvel from just a small business and turned it into the world's #1 publisher of comic books. And eventually what we have now with the Marvel multiverse and different things like that, Marvel owned by Disney and all that jazz. It's just like, it's an American tale without the mice.
Okay, my This Week in History is going to be November the 25th of 1487. That was the day that Elizabeth of York is crowned Queen of England. All right, so who's Elizabeth of York? Well, interesting story because it made a lot of changes to England. Okay, Elizabeth of York was the daughter of King Edward IV. Okay, why is that significant? Well, there's quite a bit of reasons here. She marries Henry Tudor. Now, Henry Tudor became Henry VII, and he started the House of Tudor. Now, the House of Tudor, had a lot of kids, Henry VIII, and then the bloodline went down into Elizabeth I. But what happened was that because Elizabeth of York was the daughter of Henry IV, previously there had been what was known as the Wars of the Roses. There was a king named Henry VI, who was the uncle of Henry Tudor. Henry VI was overthrown by the guy who became Edward IV. And Henry VI now this is one family, the Plantagenets. Henry VI was part of the Lancasters, and Edward IV was part of the Yorks. So the Lancasters had the red rose, the Yorks had the white rose, and hence the name, the Wars of the Roses. They were both branches of the Plantagenets. So Edward IV Edward IV dies. He had a couple of sons that ended up becoming known as the Princes of the Tower. One of them was Edward V, and the other, or should have been Edward V, and the other one was his brother Richard. But their sister, who was Elizabeth, they called her Elizabeth of York. She survived, and what happened was Richard III, their uncle, became king, and then he was defeated by Henry Tudor at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. That pretty much ended the Wars of the Roses. Well, Henry VII marries Elizabeth because she's part of the Yorks, and Henry really was part of the Lancasters. So by getting married, no reason at that point to continue the Wars of the Roses. And that pretty much ended the Wars of the Roses. So it had a significant impact. There were some incidents that take place. There was someone claimed to be still a Yorkist. He tried to claim the throne, but overall, that was pretty much the end of the Wars of the Roses. Elizabeth of York, she had several kids. A guy named Arthur, Prince Arthur, who marries Catherine of Aragon. She was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, who were the ones who sent Christopher Columbus across the ocean. Catherine of Aragon was married to Prince Arthur, but Prince Arthur, who was supposed to be the king, he dies, so that she ends up marrying her younger brother Henry, who becomes Henry VIII. And then, they had a bunch of kids, and including. Well, they had a lot of kids. Edward, God, I can't even think of all the names. Elizabeth had Henry VIII, and there was also Margaret Tudor, who becomes the Queen of Scotland, and her descendant is Mary, Queen of Scott, and her son is James VI, King James VI of Scotland, who becomes King James I of England, or Great Britain, rather. And, he's the one who came out with the King James Bible. And, that's pretty much how England and Scotland joined up and became Great Britain. So kind of, pretty fascinating. If Elizabeth of York wasn't there to kind of cement the Lancasters and the Yorks, the Wars of the Roses could have kept going. So anyway, but that happened November the 25th of 1487.
I like how your This Week in History is always about 4 to 5 times longer than mine. All right. Well, our book and movie recommendations are coming up. I trust that you are prepared.
I am. And it's going to be kind of tied into my This Week in History.
Beautiful.
All right. So how does my book and movie recommendation? First of all, I do want to recommend the Isom, the comic, because we need more entertainment like that. So I do recommend Isom for the comic books. For books, okay, so I've got these two books here. The Wars of the Roses and The Last White Rose. Now, these are folio edition books. Desmond Seward is the author. I happen to have a collection of them. Wars of the Roses is pretty fascinating. And, if you want to learn a little bit about, what went on. The Plantagenets had been, the family that ruled England since the days of Henry I. And, well, now let me tell you, Henry II. Because Henry II was the son of Matilda, who was supposed to be the queen, but she got, Stephen of Blue Eyes or whatever. You got to go back. Anyway, the Plantagenets ruled England until Henry VII, and then it became the House of the Tudors. And then eventually their descendants became the House of the Stuarts. This is where James I comes in. Anyway, so get these books. Pretty good. In terms of movie, well, I mentioned Elizabeth of York. This is the White Queen. I've discussed this movie before, but I figured it all kind of ties in with our stories. This is actually a pretty good miniseries. Now, this is about Elizabeth of York's mother. Now, she was the wife of of Edward IV. And, I got to tell you that Rebecca Ferguson, you know who she is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I first saw her in one of the Mission Impossible movies. And she was, damn. I think I was married at the time. And I remember telling my wife, I would leave you for Rebecca Ferguson. You don't see no wedding ring.
Thanks, Rebecca.
But yeah, other than Bar Raphael, if that's her name, the Israeli.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
She
and
was
Wonder Woman.
She was
that
my
one
number
too.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about women from Israel or Europe that just always fascinated me.
Yeah, well, those last two are from Israel.
But Rebecca Ferguson, I was like, give me Rebecca Ferguson. But anyway, The White Queen. It really is a very good miniseries. It shows the intrigue that took place during Edward IV and Richard III's reigns. And, she was fascinating story about a curse that she put on the family. Just watch it. And it's kind of ironic about the curse because it kind of affected her in some way. But
all right, my book recommendation is the Isom first comic book strip. Now, first comic book. This is the first edition. The cover, I think, is on C, so it's going to be like a third edition, I want to say, but still the first comic book for Rippaverse Comics. Go get it. And Christmas is coming up. So buy your nephew, your niece, or your grandkids or your kids, whatever. It doesn't matter. But we need to invest in good quality art, and the garbage that has been perpetuated and propagated and pushed on us for God knows how long now. Stem the tide and go get this. And it's not like, oh, do them a favor. Like, no, this is like freaking legit. Freaking legit comic book. Like, he has like long time professionals who have worked with him on this. So it's fantastic stuff. My movie recommendation, I mentioned The Batman. He hadn't watched it. I wasn't a fan. I gave it like a 5 out of 10. But Batman, the trilogy, the Christopher Nolan trilogy, especially The Dark Knight, but I really enjoyed all of them. Go watch those. Go watch The Batman. Let me know what you thought. But I wasn't that big of a fan. I liked a few of the scenes, but I thought they tried too hard in a number of areas. And then at the same time, I just thought it was a sort of poorly done movie altogether. All right, that is it for the episode. Alan, do you want to say something else?
No, I want to say the Ben Affleck series. Ben Affleck sucked as Batman. I haven't seen the. I really don't even know much about the new Batman, but no, I agree. The Christopher Nolan Batman series was incredible. I can't say enough good things about those 3 movies.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw Ben Affleck was going to be Batman, I was like, well, he's a terrible actor, so I'm also not going to watch him ruin an icon.
He also talks too much.
Yeah, like my co-host over there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that is it for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. We will talk to you. I'm not even sure if we're having an episode next week because of Thanksgiving. I can't remember when Thanksgiving is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that's it. We'll talk to you later.